Okay, so while making this video, literally while editing the last little bits, DE put a hotfix in the game that basically took away all of the damage attenuation from most of the enemies that have them. So you won't have damage attenuation on Babau units anymore. You won't have them on Scaldred Dedicant units anymore. They even remove damage attenuation from Demolishers. So disruption saved, I guess. Apart from that, I put a lot of time and effort into this video, so please check it out. There will still be some good tidbits of information. Leave a like, subscribe, all of that jazz. Thank you guys. Please check out the video anyway. Bye. Damage attenuation has been one of the community's most protested mechanics in Warframe. And during the dev stream before Vallis Undermines, we finally got an update from Pablo.
So what are we changing about this? We're changing a few things. So first, no more flat numbers. So the way it works right now is essentially all of those damage attenuation thresholds are set up by flat numbers. So imagine something like once you deal more than 10,000 damage in a second, the damage attenuation kicks in. Well, that works fine when you're like in normal, but once you're in Steel Path, 10,000 damage is kind of nothing, so that means the attenuation kicks in right away. Once you're obviously in Deep Archimedia, it means 10,000 damage, you apply, 100 times that. So it obviously is not very useful at that point. So instead of that, now it's going to be based on percentages, and that will allow it to scale much better throughout the game. So you'll never encounter now those 30-minute fights in Deep Archimedia.
As Pablo said in the clip, the damage attenuation system has been merged into a single mechanic where every enemy that has it will utilize the same underlying mechanic. This used to not be the case, as for instance Acolytes were particularly weak against critical AoE hits, and some bosses even had personalized damage attenuation formulas. Furthermore, damage attenuation has become personal to each player in a group, which means that in groups, you should be way more effective against things like Legacytes in Elite Temporal Archimedia. This new system is now a percentage-based system, as Pablo said, which is applied to all enemies in the same way. This, in theory, should make it more intuitive and cohesive. But the more important question, of course, now is how does it actually feel? Is it still like shooting a wall for negative damage? Or does it feel like I can actually use the powerful gear that I have farmed so long and hard for? To find out whether the new damage attenuation is an improvement or not, let's find out how it stacks up against damage attenuating units like Hardmode bosses, Archons, Demolysts, Acolytes, and much more. For some of the attenuating units, I made sure to capture footage before the update was released. First, we have this Eximus Babau unit. I tested two different setups, one maximum investment build into the Bursten that looked like this, and one rather under-optimized build that looked like this. I then tested before and after the changes were live to see the differences. If we get them all side by side, you will see that the maximum investment build with the new attenuation will kill the Babau the fastest, being about 42% faster than before the update. Furthermore, we can compare the difference between the minimal investment build and the maximum investment build. In the past, the difference between having a minimal or maximally invested build was only around a 16% increase in time to kill. But now, having a maximally invested build gains you almost 54% in time to kill, which means that it will take half as much time to get rid of a Babau with an endgame build compared to a more beginner-like build. However, that was of course a single unit. Now let's look at 20 of them together, where I will smack them around with this Okina Prime Incarnon build, where I also use melee influence and blast damage. And I just want you to look at this clip, and I will let the results speak for itself. For these type of damage attenuating units, it seems that this new attenuation is a godsend and a lot better in terms of times to kill. This is also the case for Legacytes in Legacyte Harvest. And while I do not have direct comparison footage from before the patch, My anecdotal experience seems to be that they are way easier to take down, at least when using something which has high damage and a high fire rate. Now let's jump into one of the hard mode bosses, being Captain Vor. I made sure to pick two parts of the gameplay from before the patch and after the patch, where I'm barraging Vor with gunfire from a Latham, and it looks and feels pretty much identical. But with this being a single repeat, I can't say anything for certain and your own experience can differ. Anyhow, for the hard mode bosses, as far as I could tell, there's not really any huge changes. Then let's look at Archons, and while I again do not have any footage from before the changes due to time constraints, I have played Archons a bunch over the years, so I kind of know what I'm talking about, so you know, holy moly. I've never seen an Archon melt like that with my dual Toxicist. Well, I guess Archons will surely get changed. Then, as I said, Acolytes also got affected by this change, so let's see how a crit AoE and a crit non-AoE weapon performs after the patch. Here I will be comparing the Latham with the Kuva Sobek. If I'm honest, it feels like Acolytes became just a tad bit more tanky, however AoE crit guns still deal a ton of damage to them, and hitscan based weapons still feel very average. However, important to note here is that Acolytes now have a damage ceiling, just as all of the other damage attenuating units, meaning that you will pretty much never be able to one-shot them anymore, as you could before with, for instance, something like a Lex Prime Incarnal. Lex Prime Incarnal users, I will pour one out for you guys. In general, for dealing with Acolytes currently, I would advise high amounts of multi-shot, fire rate and critical damage. Next up are the Demolysts in Disruption. With some cool tech, we used to be able to get some crazy damage combos to one-shot them and bully them in multiple parallel universes simultaneously. But now, my dear lord, they are tanky boys. There is no way in the world you can one-shot them now, as the max damage is forever capped at a certain percentage of their health. This Daikyu Prime build that used to be able to wipe the floor with them? Yeah, now it's just barely a dent. In general, I assume level cap is still possible in this mode, but it will take you significantly longer, and you are way better off building for multi-shot and fire rate once again. Besides this, there's a small side note for something that I was wanting to test personally, which is that I wanted to see whether one-shots from Zephyr could be possible again. And please, for the love of God, let this be a thing. Nope. Okay. What do we have next? Oh yeah, Eidolons. To be honest with you, I'm not the best Eidolon hunter in the game. And before testing these changes, I haven't played them for probably over a year. But still, for you guys, I brushed off the rust from my amp and I went to see what's new. In general, I feel like these changes will be pretty controversial. With there being a damage ceiling, one-shots on Eidolons will now be impossible. This may mean that most of the meta setups that did the one-shots will have to be changed around to, for instance, increase fire rate. Then for breaking the Eidolon shields, I found that targeting the weak spots with your operator amp was very effective, and more effective than I remember it being. All in all, as a casual player of Eidolons, I didn't really mind it too much, but if you're an avid hunter, let me know in the comments down below what you think about the changes. So yeah, that pretty much covers all of the damage attenuation changes. One thing is for certain, you will never be able to one-shot any boss or mini-boss ever again. At least if they have damage attenuation, that is. Overall, these changes were very mixed for me personally. On the one hand, it doesn't really feel like much has changed at all, but this is of course all coming from my singular perspective and I have only tested it in solo play. Then again, on the other hand, losing the ability to one-shot with high damage and low fire rate weapons means that they have basically become fully invalidated for most endgame activities that involve damage attenuation. There are definitely some damage attenuating units that need to see some drastic changes, like Archons, but let's wait and see what DE cooks up. God, I hope for once it's a tasty meal instead of bland slop.